The California sun blazed high over Beverly Hills, casting a golden glow on the polished glass mansions that lined the street. Luxury cars slid past, their engines purring like well-fed beasts, but Sandra Bullock barely noticed. She adjusted the sleeves of her grey hoodie, her sneakers soundless on the spotless pavement. She didn't belong here, at least, that's what the people walking past her seemed to think. She stopped in front of a towering estate, its modern design a sharp contrast to the traditional mansions around it. The house screamed wealth, the kind of wealth that didn't need to prove itself. A real estate sign stood proudly on the manicured lawn, gleaming in the afternoon light. Sandra barely had time to reach for the doorbell before it swung open. A woman stood there, tall, blonde, and polished to perfection. Her beige blazer clung to her frame, her sharp heels clicking against the marble threshold. The golden name tag pinned to her lapel read, Chelsea Langley, Luxury Estates. Chelsea's smile was tight, professional, but her eyes, they scanned Sandra like a credit card with insufficient funds. "Can I help you?" Chelsea's voice was honey-dipped steel, smooth but firm. Sandra met her gaze with calm indifference. "I'm here for the showing." Chelsea hesitated, just for a second, but Sandra caught it. A flicker of doubt, a moment of calculation. This woman didn't think she belonged here. "Oh!" Chelsea recovered quickly, flashing another rehearsed smile. "We usually work with pre-qualified buyers. Have you been in touch with your financial advisor?" Sandra's lips curved slightly, a ghost of a smile. "I prefer to see a place first, then decide if it's worth my time." Chelsea blinked. That was not the response she expected, but she wasn't about to waste her energy on someone who clearly didn't fit the profile. "Well," she said, stepping aside, "I suppose a tour won't hurt." Sandra walked in, unbothered by the tension hanging in the air. Chelsea thought she had control of this conversation. She had no idea how wrong she was. The air inside was cool, scented with fresh-cut roses and expensive wax polish. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, bouncing off sleek marble floors. Everything about the house screamed perfection. Perfection built for the elite. But Sandra's expression remained unreadable as she stepped further in, her gaze scanning the space like she had seen 100 homes like this before. Chelsea walked ahead, her heels clicking against the marble, as if reminding Sandra who was in charge here. As you can see, this estate is one of the finest in Beverly Hills. It features 6 ensuite bedrooms, an infinity pool, a private theater, and... "Is the foundation reinforced for seismic activity?" Sandra interrupted, running her fingers along the quartz countertop. Chelsea blinked. "Excuse me." "The foundation," Sandra repeated. "Los Angeles is earthquake-prone. If I were to invest, I'd want to know how stable the structure is." A beat of silence. Then Chelsea let out a small laugh, the kind people give when they're amused but trying to be polite. "Most of our buyers are more focused on aesthetics and luxury, not technicalities." Sandra turned to her, tilting her head slightly. "I prefer investments that last." Chelsea's smile faltered for just a second before she recovered. "Of course." She gestured toward the staircase. "Shall we continue?" Sandra walked alongside her, but she could feel Chelsea's gaze flicking to her casual outfit, the way she carried herself with quiet confidence. It was clear the agent was still trying to place her, still wondering if this was a joke. By the time they reached the master bedroom, Chelsea's patience was starting to wear thin. She leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "You know," she began, her voice coated with polite condescension, "this property is listed at $25 million. Are you sure it's in your budget?" Sandra's lips pressed into a faint smile. She had been waiting for that. "And what makes you think it isn't?" Chelsea chuckled, shaking her head. "Let's just say, I have experience reading buyers." Sandra exhaled softly, as if mildly amused. "Then maybe you should look again." Before Chelsea could reply, Sandra pulled her phone from her pocket, typing something quickly. The agent arched a brow. "Texting your bank?" she asked with thinly veiled sarcasm. Sandra didn't look up, Number just letting someone know I'm here. Chelsea let out a small sigh, clearly convinced she was wasting her time. Well, she said, shifting her weight, if you're serious about this property, I'd suggest coming back with someone who can actually... A low, powerful engine roar echoed from outside. Chelsea's words died mid-sentence. Sandra didn't turn. She just slipped her phone back into her pocket and smiled. Perfect timing. Chelsea frowned and took a step toward the window, watching as a sleek black Porsche 911 Turbo S glided to a stop in the driveway. The door swung open and a tall figure stepped out. Dressed in a dark jacket, jeans and sunglasses, he moved with effortless confidence, his presence demanding attention. But it wasn't until he removed his glasses that Chelsea's heart skipped a beat. Keanu Reeves. Her breath hitched. And then, he started walking straight toward Sandra. Chelsea felt her stomach drop. Keanu Reeves, here. Her grip on professionalism slipped as she watched him approach Sandra with a casual ease, like this wasn't surprising at all, like it was expected. Sandra turned to him, her expression relaxed. Took you long enough. Keanu smirked. Traffic. He glanced at Chelsea, then at the grand space around them. So, this is the place? Sandra nodded, her eyes gleaming with something unreadable. What do you think? Chelsea straightened, quickly regaining her composure. This was her moment to pivot. If Keanu Reeves was involved, then clearly she had misjudged something. Maybe Sandra wasn't just another random visitor. Maybe she was... No, that wasn't possible. Still, she switched to her most polished tone. Mr. Reeves, she greeted smoothly, stepping forward with a bright smile. What an unexpected surprise. I had no idea you were interested in this property. Keanu turned his head slightly, as if amused by the sudden change in tone. Oh, I'm not, he said simply, sliding his hands into his pockets. Then he nodded toward Sandra. But she is. Chelsea's smile froze. The weight of the moment crashed down on her. She had spent the last 20 minutes subtly, and not so subtly, dismissing Sandra, treating her like she didn't belong here. And now, standing in front of her, was one of Hollywood's most private, respected, and ridiculously wealthy actors, acting like Sandra was the only person in the room who mattered. Sandra watched Chelsea carefully, savoring every micro-expression that flickered across her face. You know, she said softly, tilting her head, you were right about one thing. Chelsea swallowed. And what's that? Sandra let a small, knowing smile tug at the corner of her lips. Some people really don't belong in this world. She let that sink in. Then, after a pause, but I'm not the one who doesn't belong here. Chelsea's face lost all color. Keanu chuckled under his breath, shaking his head slightly. I think Sandra wants to hear more about the house, he said, his voice light but laced with amusement. Can we continue the tour? Chelsea took a second too long to respond, her mind still struggling to process everything. Then, forcing a stiff nod, she gestured toward the next room. Oh, of course, she stammered. Right this way. Sandra exchanged a glance with Keanu before following. The air in the room had completely shifted. Chelsea wasn't in control anymore. And Sandra, she had just begun. Chelsea's heels clicked against the marble as she led them into the grand living area, but her usual confidence was gone. She had spent years perfecting the art of reading buyers, controlling every conversation, but now she felt completely off balance. Sandra walked slowly, her eyes sweeping the room, her movements unhurried. She wasn't just touring the house anymore, she was owning the space. Keanu strolled beside her, hands still in his pockets, as if this was nothing more than a casual afternoon errand. But Chelsea could see it now, the unspoken dynamic between them. Sandra wasn't just some random guest. She was someone important. And the fact that Chelsea had failed to see it earlier made her stomach churn. Still, she wasn't about to fully surrender. Not yet. She cleared her throat and forced a polite smile. As you can see, this home is a masterpiece of modern architecture. The designer spared no expense, imported Italian marble, handcrafted cabinetry, a state-of-the-art home automation system. Sandra stopped suddenly, running her fingers along the edge of a polished countertop. Italian marble, huh? Chelsea nodded quickly, eager to regain control. Yes, only the highest quality, but how does it hold up against stains? Sandra interrupted, turning slightly, her expression unreadable. Chelsea blinked. Well, marble is elegant, but it does require careful maintenance. Sandra smirked. So, it stains easily. Chelsea let out a small, forced laugh. Some clients prioritize aesthetics over practicality. Sandra glanced at Keanu. What do you think? Wouldn't quartzite have been a better option? Just as beautiful, but far more durable. Keanu nodded thoughtfully. Yeah, I'd go with quartzite. Less maintenance. Same high-end look. Sandra turned back to Chelsea, eyes glinting. Strange that a multi-million-dollar house would use materials that aren't practical. Almost as if it's designed for people who only care about appearances. Chelsea's jaw tightened. She felt like she was standing in quicksand. For the first time she saw what was really happening. Sandra wasn't just browsing this property, she was testing her. Every word, every question, every comment had been deliberate, and Chelsea had failed. Trying to recover, she quickly gestured toward the staircase. Why don't we move on to the master suite? Sandra exchanged a glance with Keanu before following. Chelsea's voice sounded confident again, but the power had already shifted. And Sandra, she was just getting started. The grand staircase curved elegantly upward, leading to the master suite. Chelsea walked ahead, trying to regain the authority she had so effortlessly wielded earlier. But it was slipping. She could feel it. Sandra followed, her steps slow, deliberate. She wasn't rushing. She was absorbing. Every detail, every flaw, every unspoken assumption Chelsea had made about her. Keanu stayed a step behind, hands still tucked in his pockets, watching the dynamic unfold with quiet amusement. Chelsea cleared her throat. This suite includes a private terrace, dual walk-in closets, and a spa-inspired bathroom with sunset views. Truly the crown jewel of the property. Sandra stepped out onto the terrace, letting the warm California breeze brush against her skin. From up here, the entire city stretched out beneath them, shimmering in the afternoon sun. Keanu leaned against the railing. Hell of a view. Sandra nodded. It is. Then, without looking at Chelsea, she said, but views don't build trust. Chelsea stiffened. I'm not sure I follow. Sandra turned to face her, arms crossed. This house is beautiful, but I'm not just buying a home. I'm investing in the experience, the people, the process. She paused, letting her words settle. And after today, I'm not sure I trust you to handle that. Chelsea's stomach twisted. Sandra held up a hand. No excuses. You judged me before you even knew me. And now, because of Keanu, you're scrambling to fix your mistake. That's not professionalism. That's opportunism. Chelsea swallowed hard. She had no defense. For the first time, there was no scripted response, no carefully rehearsed sales pitch to save her. She had spent years in luxury real estate, navigating high-stakes deals with high-profile clients, and yet, in front of Sandra, she felt small. Keanu let out a low chuckle, breaking the tension just enough to make Chelsea feel even more foolish. You know, he said, glancing at Sandra, I'd say she makes a pretty strong case. Sandra smiled faintly, but didn't take her eyes off Chelsea. The real question is, do you? Chelsea hesitated. Then, with visible effort, she forced a deep breath. You're right, she admitted. I misjudged you, and I regret it. Sandra studied her for a moment. Regret doesn't mean much. What matters is whether you actually learn from it. Chelsea nodded slowly. And how exactly do I prove that? Sandra held her gaze for a long moment, then she exhaled. We talk numbers. Chelsea blinked. This deal wasn't lost, it had just begun. Chelsea swallowed her pride and straightened her shoulders. She had underestimated Sandra, badly, but this was her last chance to salvage the deal. She took a deep breath. "All right," she said carefully. "Let's talk numbers." Sandra didn't react immediately. She let the silence stretch just long enough to make Chelsea uncomfortable. Then finally she spoke. 30 million. Chelsea's breath caught in her throat. "That's above the asking price." Sandra's eyes sharpened. "I know." Chelsea hesitated, unsure whether this was a test or a power move. Either way, she wasn't about to question it. I can have the paperwork drawn up immediately." Sandra nodded. "Good." She glanced at Keanu. "What do you think?" Keanu smirked. "I think you just made a real estate agent rethink her entire career." Chelsea forced a smile, but the weight of the moment pressed down on her. This wasn't just about a sale anymore. This was about the lesson. Sandra stepped forward, lowering her voice. "You judged me because I didn't fit your idea of a serious buyer. You thought you could read me, but you only saw what you wanted to see." Chelsea clenched her jaw, but didn't argue. Sandra tilted her head. "Let's see if you really learned something." She extended a hand. Chelsea stared at it for a beat before reaching out and shaking it. Sandra's grip was firm, in control. Keanu chuckled under his breath. "Looks like you just got yourself a business partner." Chelsea managed a small, nervous laugh. "I guess I did." Sandra turned, walking toward the exit. Keanu followed, but before stepping out, he paused and glanced back at Chelsea. "Oh," he added casually. "Next time, don't let appearances fool you." And with that, they were gone. Chelsea stood there, heart pounding, watching them leave. She had closed the deal. But the real lesson? She would never forget it.